I was very late this morning because my car broke down.
Wow.
And I was in like East Pittsburgh. It was like 7:30 in the morning, and the call tow truck to get my car towed to my house. And then I had to come over here, and I barely got here at quarter to 10? Something like
No.
that. It was like after 10.
Few minutes late.
Yeah, but the building was open, so we got everything going okay. We're only about maybe 20 minutes late starting. But you know, we did have a conversation earlier. We'll give this a break too. We were talking about Tanisha, and that's the subject that we're talking about. And I'm gonna continue that conversation. Let me give you. So we'll continue this conversation to see what else we can probably add to that as well. I want to thank Joanne once again for doing our presentation and for coming out. Thank you very much. She was one of our media sponsors with her Positivity Pittsburgh Live, as well as the New Pittsburgh Court.
And you know, one of the things I have to say is, you know, I hope next year information that is out there is, it's priceless, as they say, or the commercial sense. And I would hope if everybody here could read two people of them who fill this room. He does a labor of love in his own grief and his own expense. And like Tanisha mentioned today, you have to support the people that are doing things for the community. And not only is Kevin things to be out there working, but he's reached out beyond that. And he's an influencer. I don't know how much you know, this man is an influencer. He's a community influencer. And he's very humble. I noticed when we went around when we talked, he didn't introduce himself, he didn't talk about the things that he does. But he's been around for a long time, he knows his stuff, and he's got a lot of good information. And really, I hope that next year he does this. And you know what, if everybody here just put in, you know, what if everybody that wants to get involved, just put our media sponsor, put in like $10 or $20, double expenses. I think that's really important thing to think about. So I just want to say that he's done a really good job. I appreciate you.
So I guess I will talk about myself now.
All right.
No, but I'm going to let some more folks introduce themselves who just came in the room. There's Sheila Beasley, good friend of mine, and Ellen Green and Rick Adams. And we're going to let them all introduce themselves, as well as that young lady over there.
That's my mom, Reverend Beasley. She's an onlooker today. That's my mother, Reverend Beasley.
And some of the folks that have been here today, like Denise had to go to the urban journalism workshop.
Yep, and I was there.
And that's what Sheila just came to do. You know, so media roles will be changed. They've been going out talking to young people today at the urban journalism workshop with the Black Pittsburgh Media Federation.
Right. They moved in today on campus. Yeah.
All right.
Oh, Joanne.
The reason I have a we have a campaign a little bit we're working at establishing.
So we'll let Sheila and Alvin and Rick talk about themselves and give you a little bit of background. Then we're going to have a discussion. And I kind of like this setting because we're sitting around, it's a little bit more casual, and people seem a little bit more relaxed when they want to talk about stuff. We're going to go back to Tanisha, when she gave the earlier presentation on cultural appropriation, and she talked about gentrification. We're going to go even further in that. We're going to get some opinions from Sheila and Alwyn and Rick, because they've all been involved in many different things culturally in the community. And Al was directly involved in that with dealing with Holy Nation and the Save Race Street Committee and all kinds of different things. So we'll get more into the discussion about that. So first we have Sheila Beasley.
All right. I'm just going to look into call this a conversation. Those are all buzzwords that zoom around my life. Personally, from my experience in growing up, inner city, Manchester, North Side, I'm watching a lot of gentrification as it relates to community, but also in my academic field and looking at the way we work together in diversity. I'm working on my doctorate in sociology and urban studies, and it's just fascinating to think about these exchanges and how much we can learn from talking with each other. So Kevin, I just have, I don't start to ask me a question, I'll write random thoughts forever, but my thought about, my immediate thought as it relates to gentrification really comes from the importance of, you know, as we are, and even as we look at pop culture and music, I mean, I'm an artist as well, I sing and act, and I think with any side effect of gentrification, we're talking about the dishonor, if you will, that's given to the roots, to the history, to the foundation that, you know, of a product or a service or what we even grow into. There isn't anything wrong with growth. We know that. There isn't anything wrong with multiculturalism, diversity, association. I think my first attack or my first response, though, and I appreciated being part of the title of this, is the erasure of Black culture, physically and culturally. And I think the violencing part, or the disturbing part of gentrification, as I said, is that point where there's so much of an assimilation that we lose track of the roots, we lose track of the culture. The other misnomer that happens oftentimes with gentrification, I have to take this title from Spike Lee. You probably have heard him talk about the Christopher Columbus syndrome. And you can apply it to some of these artists, even on, was it Tamika who presented this earlier? Tanisha. Mm-hmm. That, because as with Iggy, as with Elvis, as with many of our communities, it's not new. There is so much that has already been part of building an artist like an Elvis or an Iggy, and of course imitation is the highest form of flattery. However, to come in with a syndrome, with a mindset that I'm taking on something new, whether that's a community or even as an act, is where I think Spike is on point when he talks about a syndrome, a Christopher Columbus syndrome, that I'm indeed discovering, or I am the first inhabitant. So I'll leave those two immediate reactions to gentrification and hear from my peers. And I want to actually use this as an opportunity to learn. I always say, and I will say this to anyone who doesn't know me, part of what comes out of my mouth immediately is we are more alike than different. So let's use these exchanges as opportunities to learn and grow. But when I looked at the title, Kevin, and I thought about my immediate response, I think some of the challenge, and maybe even as far as insult with gentrification, comes from a lack of respect of the history, the foundation culture that precedes, as well as this idea that perhaps this is something new. Elvis shaking his hips and Iggy rapping were not new. And there were people of other cultural representations that were doing that beyond African Americans, primarily African. So I'll shut up, I want to talk.
When we talk about the lack of, I think part of it is a lack of education as well, because people don't get the information they really need. So they say, we know about this. Joanne was talking earlier about the banjo. You know, and it's the fact that people don't know about the banjo, or the banjo through pictures and past experiences, banjos and watermelons or what have you, gave like negative connotations that immediately turned people off from that. We could even talk about country music, all right? We talk about country music. Well, we all came from the country. I mean, our ancestors, our families come from the country. So why are we going to be embarrassed or deny the fact that, hey, DeFord Bailey was was part of the Grand Ole Opry, and he was a black man, you know. But we talk about that. Well, Charlie Pride came later, but DeFord Bailey was there from the very beginning at the Grand Ole Opry in Nashville. But I mean, it wasn't cool that they called him the mascot, but he was there, and he should be. People should know about that and the role that he played. My dad used to talk about him. Because my dad grew up listening to the Grand Ole Opry on the radio. And he told me all about the Fort Bailey.
Country has its roots in gospel, too.
What's that?
Country has its roots in gospel.
Oh, yeah.
I
That's
just want
definitely.
to make one thing. My daughter-in-law is African American. And I think there is a lack of education across the board with the younger generation.
Right.
Oh my goodness.
We were talking one day, we were talking about George Wallace. And I was explaining to him who George Wallace was. And I said his mother never, God rest her soul, never touched bad about anybody. When he got shot back in the 60s, or maybe early 70s, she said, that son of a bitch deserved to be shot. He was a good Christian woman who never taught anybody. Well, my daughter-in-law tells my son that she wishes that I would refrain from me to go back and check your history. And these kids don't know. I don't know if they're not teaching in schools or what the problem is. This generation, those millennials, have no clue about their history.
None. It doesn't even need to be that far back in history. I think about growing up, late 70s, early 80s, etc. And my father and my family, the big cool bands of the 80s and the 70s, Earth, Wind and Fire, and all those. If you look at same thing, if you look at those posters, if you look at video, you will always see a Caucasian brother grooving with the African American brothers, and even more cultural representations. Take a group like Earth, Wind and Fire, take one like Mandra. You'll see all types of beautiful amalgamations of culture, but it's not excluding white. So even when we think about R&B music, the big bands that were coming up in the 70s and 80s, much later than Walsh, but you can't have music without this, insertion of multiple cultures. And our kids do not know that, and it's so much a problem of education.
Just they're around it. There's nobody here. You guys really know. Laramie Avenue had a strong Italian community on one side and a strong African American community on the other side. And everybody hugged.
Oh, yeah.
They were all brothers.
Yeah.
And people just don't remember, or they don't know. I was so excited to hear this gentleman talk as a show about a blog about Homewood. I think Homewood's one of our hidden jewels. There's so many wonderful things. There's so many business people that instead of leaving when the neighborhood went down, they dedicated themselves to revitalizing the neighborhood. And God bless them. People don't realize that Homewood, Brushland area, look at some of the houses, was once an exclusive plantation area. Was one of the most beautiful parts. So just drive through the Homewood area and check out some of the architecture, and you'll realize what a beautiful upscale neighborhood this was at one point in time. Yeah,
So really, we can't say, oh, the kids, they don't know their history.
No.
We
Yeah.
don't know our history. Because when I went to this, rice project, and that they're having a Carnegie Mellon, where they're talking about the rice culture, how important it was, and how to America, and how many slaves died, and I don't know anything about the Charleston area being, that bringing in innovative slaves who knew how to grow rice. Out of my view at all. So it's not, the kids don't know our history that we've lived through. We don't know the past history. And that's why, like I said, follow the banjo, and you will see racism intertwined with this African instrument.
Have you written a book on it yet?
No, there isn't.
You should.
There are better writers who have written it,
Doesn't
but
matter.
who has read it? Who goes to, how many of you have ever gone to see the Carolina Chocolate Drops?
I remember going to Pitt in 1970, walking to the big gymnasium by trees to register for classes. Then class was called Black History. And I walked in and registered for the class. And they looked at me like, why do you want to take this class? I said, because I want to know.
Imagine that.
What I know is, am I not allowed to take this class? Oh, no. Well, there were 3 Caucasians, non-Hispanic. What is the word now? Non-Hispanic?
Hispanic wasn't in there.
Anyway, so we were there in the classroom, and it just was a little odd, I guess. So I came and I did that again. But are there still Black History studies at the universities? And why isn't this taught in our high schools?
That's the point.
Well, you've got another point, because women's history, black and white, and yellow and brown, I mean, it's totally ignored. And I'm working really hard to establish the Pennsylvania Women's Hall, what we call an achievement, because black history and women's history, I mean, there's been so much contributions. Eli Whitney didn't invent the cotton mill, a woman did. George Washington Carver, fabulous. There's so much that has been, that we're ignoring, and so it's part of our overall culture, which is not good for any of us. And it takes away the respect that young people have for themselves, is what I believe, and young women and young men. If you don't know your history and what your parents have come through, and your grandparents, your forebears, whoever you are, you really don't have a sense of belonging. And in the last 50 years, I mean, I'm over 60. The last 50 years have just been just boom, change. I mean, change that desperately needed, and still more, but we've gone through, if we think about it, from Rosa Parks to, my mother telling her when her mother grew up in the South and what was wrong, and she says, they were always in trouble because they were doing something they weren't supposed to do, So, but I mean, it makes me sad, because if you know who you are, you can feel better. You have a foundation. So I hope we can find a way to teach our history.
Yeah, and that's the question. How do you teach history? How can that old history be taught to us and to the kids?
You need to have another session just on that.
One of the answers to that question is we have to be intentional. As you said, Kevin, we just had the kids come in for the urban journalism, the Frank E. Bolden. You know Frank E. Bolden, he was nationally known, and he was one of the first reporters with the Courier, etc. Just a phenomenal person. Nevertheless, we had Caucasian students come into the workshop the last 2 years. And it's to the answer of your point that these parents have sought this program. It's a great resource available to our kids. And our kids, the hour is starting to expand to kids with the interest. Obviously, it'll always have a focus for minority children, but when we have the Caucasian students come in with their families, we are answering that question. You have to seek it. You have to go for it. You have to find the need, and you're agreeing with me, brother. It has to be something within you, and bold as you were 20 years ago. Taking your kids to they're taking them to an urban program, and I can tell you, being an instructor and watching the interactions, it's beautiful. It's like if we could just encapsulate that and put it in the world from the parents, intention for their kids to learn, and then the cultural exchange that comes from just being together, eating together, learning together.
And that's part of the revolution. And why I say that is because the rift and the divide that has been created in society from slavery times up to now has been intentionally by the real enemy is not a color. The real enemy is a spirit. A spirit that wants to divide and conquer. So I'm going to misinform you, the major population. I'm going to oppress you and misinform you as well, and create enemies here to just destroy.
And feed your fears.
So now, so a lot of it is miseducation across the board. And so now when people are really now, this revolution is coming where people are more or less coming together, understanding who the real enemy is, and those who are at the top levels of not just society, the world, who have orchestrated it for their own benefit. Split and divide their own country, fund wars on both sides for money, and it goes all across the board. So so I always say it's important that each one teach one type of concept, because if one person gets something out of it, that can make a big difference. Just one person gets something out of it. And so, like what she is saying, if people now, more people have the opportunity to seek out, and information is now being unoppressed, or I should say, when truth is trodden down, it always rises again. It cannot. Those things done in the dark always comes to light. Always. And it may be a while, but it's eventually going to happen. And that's how the process starts. So when you have blacks and whites coming together, because that never was an issue in ancient times. Because a lot of nations were it wasn't about skin color. It was about, okay, this is my nation, this is my heritage. And some were all one color. But a lot of nations, no. It wasn't even a problem. Color was not the issue at all.
The issue of race didn't really come into balance until money became an issue. Money became the god.
Right.
Which then started really that someone in this lecture 2 nights ago said that the concept of race only became an issue around just as the Civil War was building up, in the early 1800s, because they needed to justify why they could enslave a segment of people. And so then all of a sudden, race. They're a different race. And then that was the story that was told.
And that was a branding, more or less, a branding to protect their quote-unquote investment. So now, I can't run away. Anything that is my color is my money.
Kevin, I just want to say, I have to leave you and apologize. I'd love to spend continuous conversation, but you make this a once-a-year thing, and I see you as an influencer in the community. I see you as a mover shaker in the community. I see other people around this room that have been here today who are influencers. And I would say to you, you put a lot of effort into doing this once a year. What if you had monthly or quarterly workshops on different discussions, and then you could build up to this each one conference? It's very important what you're doing here. And I think other people involved with I don't think the community understands. And I would say that you could get a free room somewhere, small room that hold 30 people, maybe a library or something, and have these conversations, and then you would build your audience, and you would build up to your yearly conference.
Right. It's like I haven't thought about that, and I think about that all the time. It's just like my personal life, because as Rick
One person, so you need to do this by committee. Form a committee.
Yeah.
And we can give you help. We'll work with you.
For the last 2 years, I don't know whether everybody knows this, and that's why we didn't have a conference last 2 years. I went back to school. Not that I don't have experience in a lot of things, because I do, because I've had a long professional, life working in social service and working with the city and different things like that. But I went back to supplement some of the things that I already know, to really etch it in stone for those don't think I know enough to do, you know, and I give them a piece of paper and say, okay, well, I did it, okay. Now are you going to accept what I have to say now? But anyhow, I've been going through that for the last 2 years. So trying to juggle that, but I am going to take that in consideration. We've also talked about taking each one, teach one to different parts of the country. You know,
different parts of the community go in different communities?
Well, yeah, I understand that.
First.
Yeah, but we've been talking about taking it to different parts of the country as well. Some of the other past participants, we've talked about doing that. I'm like, well, how are we going to design it for each different city to like focus on some of the things that people have on their minds there? But yes, you're right about taking it to different parts of the community as well. Yeah, and that's one reason why I came off of the campus of Carnegie Mellon, because the people at Carnegie Mellon really wasn't respecting that. You know, so I wanted to bring it out to the community.
You've gotten a bigger crowd.
Most of the people that came to Each One Teach One were at Carnegie Mellon weren't even students. When I tried to get the radio station there to help support what I did, they wouldn't support me. Believe it or not, you know, they like the fact that I do this show every week because they get like free information. But I do this show every week. Rick and I have been doing radio together for close to, 20 years?
I always ask you, I lose track.
It might be over 20 years now that we've been doing radio together, and we also grew up together. But Rick and I have talked about all these different subjects, you know, time and time again, cultural appropriation. We definitely talk about gentrification, like all the time, because the community where we grew up at in Homewood is going through this. Alwyn has been.
Think about this now. Seriously. I mentioned the word gentrification in a crowd, college educated,
Right.
non-Hispanic, Caucasians, that's the word, non-Hispanic. They look like the Hispanic scale, what I'm talking about.
Heck, yeah, I mean, cheap property.
What am I talking, what are you talking about? So I think that there's a need to educate, not just in the Black community. I think there's a need to, that's why I said you're branching out.
Right.
I think you need to branch out. I think when we're in the media, there's a responsibility as to why I don't do any negative news. I refuse reporting bad news. I mean, I report when somebody died and there's I'm going to do a little thing about them and how great they were. But I don't do any negative news. I refuse to do it. There's enough people broadcasting that. I think that we have a responsibility as media people, whether we're podcasters or on the radio, to educate, to begin to educate people. You've got a forum. You've got a forum, and you need to use it. I think if we hear from you once a year. What if, and I know that everyone stories, and I understand sometimes life gets in the way. I would like to see you just send out a blast now that it's over with, and say we had a great conference, talk about what happened, etc. And we discussed that we should do this every quarterly or once a month, talk about various issues and how many would be wrestling with on the committee to help put this together, because I'm one person and it's a little bit too much.
You know what I think would be a better, can I go now? What I think would be a better idea is if Kevin has this once a year, but he brings in maybe people or gets a grant written or something, but brings in people from other parts of the country to talk about the issues that are in play. What?
That was happening.
Did it happen?
I think
He's had people from
I think there's another thing, what our community needs, and I grew up in the Black community, I just, those are nuts. I didn't know anything different. I just was the only redhead kid around. I was the odd one. So, we need to be talking more. We're not different. We have a unique culture that we can
We
share and
communicate, but
grow.
we don't communicate.
We don't.
A couple of things. I've been listening, and it's been great conversation. The African revolutionary Cabral says, "Tell no lies, claim no easy victories." And what we're talking about is very complex. It's contextual, situational, temporal. It's of a particular time. My father grew up on Larmer Avenue, so the picture you painted, there's obviously a reality to it, but it's an exact opposite. He told me about watching riots between the Italians and the blacks. My maternal grandfather came to Homewood in the 1920s, so I had little white playmates I could play with. The state rep lived across the street in the block Kevin and I were in, who was white at the time. And then I saw it flip very quickly. And so we need to be careful because history is always a narrative. His story, obviously there's a gender thing there, but it's always has a cultural base to it. It has a power, if you will. The establishment gets to tell the history for the most part. But then there are other folks who have different perspectives that may or may not get to be heard. From the very beginning, if we accept what they're now saying is pretty much true, that there were maybe 7 groups, clans, families, groups of families that left Africa and populated the world, then the whole conversation about race is like crazy. And I always get mad because I'm like, well, that would be like talking about collies and German shepherds and whatever. Pit bulls are different races. And I'm like, no, they're all dogs. We're all dogs, And then it gets even more interesting to me because it appears, and they've said that the oldest DNA on the planet is among the darkest people on the planet. So, what I learned when I go like buy clothes or something, and there's like a knockoff, or if you reproduce a picture too many times, I mean, we don't even want to go there about when people start talking about purity, ridiculous concept that we all came from the same place. And then if you keep replicating something, doesn't it diminish in its quality? So anybody that wants to claim that, like, be careful. How close are you to the beginning? Yeah. In some ways, maybe we advanced and maybe we didn't. Gentrification is interesting, and I can see it happening. I almost feel like I see it every day, where I see black people disappear and white people appear. And I've read about it, and talked about it, and studied it, how clashes start. And I can see it getting ready to start now. I mean, it ticks me off. It is not on my radar screen, bicycle lanes and dog parks. I mean, it ain't politically correct, but I'm like, that ain't important. People are hungry, babies need Pampers, folks on drugs, people got broken down houses with no support, they can't keep it up.
We need better education.
That stuff is what's going on. Our mayor seems to be a good guy, but he's all into, I want to attract all these people to come here. But the answers always come up short for the people that are here. And I think that the biggest problem, and some of you started to talk about it, I guess I would call it the commodification of life and everything. Everything now has a value, mercantile kind of consideration to it, so that we do things because of what it costs, or doesn't cost, or how we can increase the profit margin, which is destructive to people. I mean, that's just, when you get to the bottom line, there's a lot of stuff that you say, well, we can't afford that. Let them die. Some people say the old people should go off to the woods and die because they're no longer productive and it costs a lot of money to keep them alive. That's crazy.
Is that a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. A city is only as strong as its weakest link. So that's always going to bring the city down if they don't concentrate on the thing that needs the most help and repair and building up so that everything is strong.
When the attack on Head Start started, and Head Start goes all over, we've done in Fayette County, which I've worked in Greene County. You're talking poverty. When they start eliminating those programs in the city and the urban areas, you are affecting the future of our children, us, our country. That's the fact. But they can, I'm sorry, they can afford a brand new big bar.
See, gentrification is not new, is not limited to Fayette County, not limited to African American communities. Greene County borders Fayette County, and I'm from Fayette County. There's a river between Fayette County and Greene County, and we always talk about Greene County from our side of the tracks. Where kids used to say, "Where the men are men, the sheep are scared." But the point was that we were kids, and but realistically, Greene County is an anomaly, and I learned this in college, in that it has the highest incest rate of anywhere in the country, including the hills of West Virginia. Number
Nothing
one.
to be proud of.
Number two, the largest property owner as of 1980 was the sheriff of Greene County. The reason is that the sheriff, there was a little known old law on the books forever that allowed the sheriff to bid on tax burden property before anyone else. And then if he didn't take it, he went out to the public. Now, that may have been repealed since then. This is not limited. It's not limited. By the way, we have a friend who was a real estate agent, and this is a difference of how people see things. She wouldn't call it gentrification. She would call it real estate deals. Real estate deals.
Yeah.
I remember her telling Lawrenceville was going, she said, that's the next big community. I can get you a house for $9,000. You gotta go buy that house, but you have to live in it for a year and fix it up as you go along. And she would just constantly, on that case, buying that community. It's gonna be tough for a while, it's gonna change. So it's a different in perceptions also. My question is, maybe I'm an idiot for asking this question. Maybe I don't totally understand everything. And correct me if I'm wrong. If gentrification happens, property values go down, why isn't there some kind of program in place where people who are indigenous to the neighborhood can buy that property?
I want to answer that.
Yeah, that was.
Plus, I want to say
I'm
this.
foolish to, or am I naive to
No.
ask that question?
First, I want to say this. Pittsburgh is in Appalachia.
Yeah, it's an Appalachian city. Yes, it is. That's part of it.
Masontown is definitely an Appalachia. My dad used to be moderator for the Yakagani Baptist Association.
Oh, yeah.
You know, before he passed away, they lived in Collinsville.
Okay.
And lived there for like 20 or 25 years. All right. They lived in Collins, my mom and dad lived in Collinsville and in Uniontown. But what I know about Appalachia, you know, I know the history that in a lot of the communities, the Scotch, Irish, Italian, and African Americans all live together. All right.
Talking about
When,
it.
and they play together. That's how bluegrass music and banjo music flourished, because there were string bands and things like that. And everybody played together, and everybody lived together in the same communities. When the coal mining people came in,
That's right.
started buying up all the property, that was the first sign of gentrification in Appalachia, when they started buying all that property. That allowed people like the sheriff of Greene County to come in and buy up the property, and now what he's probably doing is giving it to the people who want to come in and do fracking.
Oh, well, yeah.
You know, so it's that vicious cycle. You look at the whole.
Over there in
Goes back
Yeah, and the thing about Lawrenceville, get in so you can buy a house for
I want to say there's
$9,000.
a flip side to
Yeah,
the
yeah.
gentrification, which typically is white elites coming in and taking advantage of low prices and buying up stuff.
Right.
Different communities, folks driven out. When Holy, the flip side, it was interesting. Where Operation Better Block is, you can look up, I think it still is, it's Second Federal Savings and Loan. I dad, helped my grandfather in there, wax the floors and clean up. But like has been done historically, looking through some stuff that was in the can, saw where folks were talking about how they were essentially driving black people out, white people out, scaring them, and then black people charging more as they moved into this better neighborhood. So it's like the underside of that is they're working. Black folk who want to move to a better place, moving on up, better community. They're getting an opportunity because they're telling them, "Hey, so-and-so here, she just moved down the street. They're coming." So now they making money. Real estate deal. Absolutely, real estate deal.
Enter Andrew Thornton.
So you create a situation, and what I've always, I'll say this, I know Elvin wants to jump in here, there's the wealth of stuff, and he's one of my heroes, what he's doing at home. But one of the things I had, argument, discussion, debate with my mother, when I was in high school, and she was telling me the same thing. See, I've always been skeptical of stuff. How, oh, we're all together, it's mostly Italian, black and white, blah, 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 blah. So I was unimpressed. I'm like, yeah, okay. I said, well, where are they now? So I looked around home, I said, they're not living here. I said, where do they work compared to where do we work? If you see some of them, do they acknowledge you? Do they know you? My point is, you can get blinded because you're side by side, but the economic situation that's going on is going on regardless. So who gets opportunities, who gets able to advance, that's still in play. So again now, not that we all live together, although it's getting to be that, the new mantra is the colorblind society. Well, hopefully it has been blown up because I watch social media, TV, and they just shoot black people all the time like that's a sport, you know.
But there's also continuing to follow the money, because that's all it is. It's just follow the money. Where you can make a profit, somebody's there trying to. And right now,
No, that's
right
not
now.
It's distorted into greed.
It's capitalism.
Okay, right now, where's the money? The money, there's a lot of cash coming in to buy housing from Asia and Europe.
Yeah,
Because they have cash.
and their money becomes worthless in the world market, so this land.
Right. Real estate, U.S. real estate, this is good stuff. And it's raising the prices now, so that, like, I live in Oakland, trying to fight that battle, and, it's a losing battle, because you can make more money by buying the property and stuffing it with students, and,
that's what's going on.
it's all these economics that is the driver. And the economics don't, sometimes they go good, sometimes they go bad.
It has to be more about.
Folks, I hate to appear to be rude, because that's totally against my nature, but I really need to hop, actually, because I'm already running late for a family affair, and I got a wife and I want to keep her. And I'm more of a writer than a speaker anyway, so I'm going to invite folks to check out Homewood Nation, and the better job that I do of doing Homewood Nation, the less that anybody will need to hear me say anything, because it will all be written down. So, having said that, it was a real pleasure having this brief time with you. Carry on.
The property, we don't, in the older neighborhoods, there isn't people can't, well, she says that I got lost, but you can't buy the property, there's no law or anything that encourages people in the neighborhood to buy or anything like that.
Well, what's going on now in the city of Pittsburgh, they want to do this land banking thing, which they've been hot on that. And that kind of like blocks the people that actually live in the community from buying up the property.
Oh, we've, West End, there were beautiful houses leading up to Ridgeville Hill, not beautiful. They were distressed properties. Again, my friend says, if you go to borrow those houses, she said, you can get one of those houses by putting $200 down because they're in foreclosure. She said, that reserves that property for you. Joanne knows, when I went and I checked every single address that was vacant or distressed property. Guess what? Every one of them had to deposits on them. And when you would check the public records, the deposits were members of the Board of Weed Fund. They got investigated.
Ah.
Yeah.
What's that?
It is,
West End, in West
and
End.
and if you probably closely
They were
look at,
investigated.
if you probably go closely look at, what's going on like in Homewood or in Armor and some of the other different parts of the city, you probably will see the same thing.
Now,
I had a conversation, and it was interesting. I was at the mayor's office, and we had a meeting about a project that we wanted to do in Homewood. About where we had a meeting, and at the meeting, one of the people that were invited to the meeting was this guy who worked for this development company. And I'm like, what's up with this? And then he told me where he lived at. He lived in the West End too. So his company is with
Lettucey at that time. At that time, she was trying to reach out to us for 3 years, and she got it here on promo right before her first album. Kim, Raheem Devine, Eric Roberson. Eric was a mainstay out here for quite a bit of time. And the one thing we noticed from that series that evolved out the magazine, because that was more of a marketing tool for the magazine as well, and it was another revenue stream for us to get sponsors involved, is that that series of artists really utilized the Midwest the way that strategically our company was set up to do. The only thing about it, there wasn't another wave of artists to follow them. It took about another 7 or 8 years of talent to follow them. And what happened is that it was promoters like myself in different markets that once they brought them once or twice, the artists began to grow a reputation and they could no longer afford it. I could, because I had a major concert outside that Kevin's been to, which was Family Unity Park. I could put them on a budget in which they had grown to, but then the other folks that were in the network began to get out of business because they could no longer afford the artists that came in at that time. So we had to reestablish this a couple of years ago, where artists who were coming in had to either be artists who were brand new to the market and they wanted to exploit their wares, or artists who were nationally known but needed to cut their teeth for the first time in the Midwest, and the label would say to them, you need to work on your musicianship, you need to work on your win on stage, you need to do this and do that. And it was at their cost. It was at their cost of them coming in. And we gave them an honorarium to come in and perform, but it was at their cost at that time. So it allowed us to grow as a business. The labels treat us as a business. And from that end of things, we began to do effective business. We're not just working with the company, but through them, and being able to ascertain the things that we need to do as well to continue to be independently promoted. Out of that, I managed artists such as Anthony David as well, K. John, who had a #1 hit record on the Ocean. Anthony David had a #1 hit record with Forevermore. And so that's how it began to evolve. This year, we expanded to doing one major outdoor show to doing 5. In fact, the biggest one we did this year was in Atlanta at the Wolf Creek Amphitheater, which was the ATL Soul Life Music Festival, which was a 2-day concert. Tickets were $25 for one day, 40 for both. And in both of those days, we sold out. It was 5,000 tickets with the same artist that we had here 10 years ago, but we all brought them all together. And so McDonald's was sponsored for that, but we ended up spending probably $140,000, but we ended up making that $250,000. So it worked out real well that we're on the booking next year for the most part. So it's just been a lot of hustle, a lot of grind, and a lot of continuing to foster relationships. And the key element for me to be successful with this is to say, You know, I'm no longer in the music business as per se, because the music business and promotion has a lot of negative connotations, and it doesn't bring a lot of positive foster relationships. So I had to say to myself, I'm no longer in this as it's constructed. I'm in the unlimited wealth entertainment business, and those things that work through my company, they work and it fit. And if the company that I'm working with treats me as a business versus an annex to their ideas, because let's face it, there's a lot of crappy art that's out there, and it's just like the artist Fran Lebowitz said, the writer, she mentioned there's too much democracy in the culture and not enough in society, which means that not everybody should be writing a book and not everybody should be recording a record. But because, you know, just think about that. So, you know, we had to be realistic in our goals and our measures. I have 35 contracted employees every year that I have on staff. I just built a website this year that features events throughout the region, whether it be Chicago, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Columbus. It's called the Inbox.club. That's ENBOX.club.com.club. And, you know, one of our slogans is keep checking messages. We're not common, which means C-O-M, you know. But primarily, we're doing a lot to just get the region going back out again and going to different shows, different concerts, different cruises, because the economy, even though it's churning slowly, it is becoming again vibrant again, to where people can have some disposable, if they have some disposable income, they would give consideration to getting out and enjoying events that's being put on right now. So we want to be able to expose that, advertise that. We've got editorial and whatnot as well. And we've got a lot of famous artists, from Eric Benet to Trex to Stephanie Mills and everybody else is on drops for the site. So I guess that's pretty much sums up what we have been able to do and what we have been doing. Kevin, and along with many other radio stations and radio hosts, has been an integral part of our success in being able to expose artists to cities and markets like this, to where they can be able to come in and be able to maintain a presence in markets such as Pittsburgh and Cleveland and what I have. So.
Could you tell people how much radio has changed since you first started?
Okay. When I first got started with radio, there didn't exist a Radio 1, there didn't exist a Clear Channel. What you had in markets was operations manager, general manager for radio station, program director, music director, which meant that you can go into a station and, given the fact that the airways are to be publicly owned, you could go in and go to the music meeting, pitch your music, pitch your idea, and you know, there was that entity there, just like your bank. Before PNC became prevalent, you had local bank ownership, that they can make a decision that they were going to give you a loan at that time, or they wanted to do business and holding their money. And it's the same way with radio. Radio has changed so significantly over the past 10, 15 years. It used to be Arbitron. Now there is a thing called a PPM number. And PPM stands for Personal People Number, which none of those things ever make it to urban citizens. I ain't saying black, but it never make it to urban settings. Whether you are Sylvanian or you are black or Latino living in an urban community, it never makes it there. Just like the Arbitron boxes. I know they paid us in college to have them if we wanted to have one, but I don't know too many people who had an Arbitron box at that time that could measure what they were watching. But the Personal People Monitor, what it does is it measures what the consumer is listening to in terms of media. And it could be, the leverage aspect of it is that it measures all media, not just terrestrial radio, but internet radio stations, because with the emergence of TuneIn and streaming, they measure that too as well. And so many of the radio stations now have websites where you can go click on a place in the website now, and it takes you there to stream. And then Clear Channel went a step further. They changed their name to iHeartMedia.com. So therefore, all of their stations are not involved with the TuneIn process, the TuneIn.com process. They're all under iHeartMedia. So they only measure research based on what they're listening to, what people listen to within their cluster of stations, which can be very skewed because, you know, they're not measuring it against something else that's going on in the market. They're just transgressing data based on what's going on in their market and with their stations. And here it is. This is what we're doing, and this is who you should put your money with us. But it really began to get very bad with Radio 1 right around 2003, 2004. The first Kanye Doss album came out in 2004, and Radio 1 at that point in time decided that they no longer wanted to meet with any more independent consulting companies. And they were the very first company to decide to do that, which meant that you couldn't hire somebody to take your music to music meetings to look at getting it played. They now wanted to deal with the VP of the record label because they had their own person indoors. So what happened was that person that they had indoors, if they liked your project, they had a menu on time buys for what it is that, this is at the time when it first started. It's changed, but they had a menu on what particular markets that they were affiliated with would cost if you wanted your music on in a program. That's what they called it, a program. So that was the beginning of it. The other line of demarcation that I compare to the Suez Canal that's over, isn't the Suez Canal between Egypt and, okay, yeah, because that canal was used and was built to separate, you know, what is called the Middle East, which Middle East of what? From Africa. That canal was used to separate history. And it's the same thing that happened with radio around that same time. You used to be able to listen to a Yes record, a Dr. Dre record, and a Anita Baker record on the same radio station. Well, they decided that we got urban mainstream, we got urban adult. Because I remember coming to Whammo, and you could get Anita Baker and Dr. Dre and all of them playing on the same radio station. But pretty much they said, adults, you go into this room, kids, you go into this room. Okay? Adults, you listen to what you listen to. Even in the pop stations, you had AC stations, and now you have hot AC or rhythmic, you know, which is for the young kids. And you have adult contemporary, which is Michael Bublé and stuff like that, which we all should be listening to. I mean, it's great music. I mean, I've heard Michael Bublé records. I'm like, wow, this is amazing. But we all should be listening to it. And ultimately that happens when, and again, I always have to draw, you know, cultural analysis to this, is that the way that slavery happened and it was a successful process in this hemisphere was that you took slaves from different dialects and you put them together, and they could no longer communicate because of language. That's how slavery worked. Then the only thing that they could communicate about was their common experience of being in slavery. Eventually, slave masters had to understand that after a while, you know, when we're going through the same damn circumstances, we're going to learn that this is what's going to unify us if our language doesn't. But the initial intent was, if you got slaves together, they could not communicate because of language. And that line of demarcation in radio substantially affected how we as adults in urban settings communicated with our kids. My parents hated Run DMC. I used to collect aluminum cans to buy Run DMC records, okay? But they tolerated it, they understood it, they knew what it was, and they knew how to deal with it. Because it was on the same stations, and often they would sleep at night when Run DMC was played because the mix party came on late at night. You know, so did the Beastie Boys, so did Public Enemy, you know, and whatnot. They were on late at night. You know, you could only hear them, you know, in the late at night on the weekend. But when they made that all of that stuff that was all late at night on the weekend began to be played at daytime and began to be part of the daily lexicon of our kids. And with the adult stuff, what you got is you never got fresh new music. What you got was, you know, stuff that we grew up on, but if it was artists who were making good adult music, and including now, they get one opportunity every 60 minutes to have a new record played. Maybe 2 new records played in a 60-minute process. So that's how that's changed. Now, going back to 2000 in the 90s, you could have college stations that broke music. Public Enemy would not be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame if it wasn't for college radio. I could say, Nirvana would not be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame if it wasn't for college radio. And they recorded 2 albums, you know, 2. Sex Pistols, the same thing. They recorded 1. So Red Hot Chili Peppers, the same thing. If it wasn't for college radio, they would not exist. But what happens is that because of the commercialization and separation of the genres, so much is that everything is so genre specific. So you had that. You had the industry coming down on, you had technology coming down in the industry with the emergence of Napster, which is now commonplace. It was at that time. But it was treated as the villain. We didn't welcome it. And then you had corporations coming down on radio all at the same time. And that element, you know, no one embraced it. Well, they publicly didn't embrace it, but behind closed doors, they were cutting deals. It's right. It's like an athlete. You know, this whole thing with Tom Brady. They're like, we're going to challenge it. We're going to challenge it. No, they're not going to challenge it. What they're doing right now is they're cutting the deal behind closed doors, and in front of an audience of people, they're saying we're challenging, we're fighting. But they're cutting a deal. They're trying to figure out how many less games he can play, even if it's just 1 less. And that's what they're looking to settle on. So that's what has happened in the change of radio. It's no longer a public airways thing. It's a license given to a private ownership to lease a signal for a certain number of years, and then after a certain number of years, they renew it. You know, and so when you had stations, including Whammo, and that was historic how that whole thing went down. When they were they pulled a plug on them, they took everybody out on a gospel cruise. All the employees were on a gospel cruise. And they came back from the gospel cruise and they found out they didn't have jobs. Yeah, right. You know, Sheridan Broadcasting at the time, it was Sheridan, wasn't it? Yeah, so it was just pretty much, they found out pretty much once they got back from spending all their money on the cruise that they didn't have a job. So it's a very different environment when it comes to things like that. I always express to artists, build your base at non-monitored radio, build your base at college radio, specialty radio, or shows that exemplify what it is that you do. With the internet, with TuneIn, I can plug in my MP3 player or my aux cord into my tablet and hear a station all over the world, whether it's on the internet or whatever have you, And those are also stations that are also selling advertisement as well that are very vibrant and they can justify their numbers. So yeah, you do have PPM, which has screwed up a lot of things, but the one thing it has happened is that it has created leverage. So, and I know it's a very popular station in DC that Cleveland Spears, who was on WPFW, does. He owns it called The Flow, rocktheflow.com. It's the Flow Radio Network. And his numbers are very comparable to many of the terrestrial stations in DC. And he gets advertisers and he has staff. And he's made it work. So, you know, it's about, now it's really understanding the technology, understanding how people can sell their product, the nuances of it. You know, you now have to go into it knowing a lot more than you ever have, because in this day and age, music is a lot more readily accessible than it ever has been. If I like a song now, I can pull it up on Google Store, buy it, and it's on my phone in a matter of seconds. You know, whereas we used to just have to wait till Friday when our paychecks come, and at lunchtime when we went to our favorite music station, we went up here, it was Peppermints at the time, right? You could go in and buy your favorite music. So, National Record Mark as well. You know, so it's you know, a lot of different mechanisms are there now, and so you have to really prepare artists on how they have to sell their music online. We spent a significant amount of time in our week doing campaigns with artists on the viral edge of things, okay? Get into the Facebook groups. Once you've posted the link of your content, post under your content to purchase, log on to, so therefore people see the content in that group, whether it be a smooth jazz group, R&B group on Facebook, or rock, or alternative rock, for such and such, log on to X and X, so they can go right there to purchase right under it if they like it. You can get a lot of sales from that. The same thing with Twitter handles. Twitter handles have become uber important with live shows, because I always encourage artists when they're selling product, the names, email addresses, and Twitter handles, because you can then load these Twitter handles into your database, and when you're actually trying to promote content, especially radio station Twitter handles, because the minute that you tweet something with the radio station Twitter handle, if they got 100,000 followers, it's going to all those 100,000 followers. And if they retweet it, then it'll go directly to them. It'll be on their Twitter page, but it'll go directly to them. So now another 100,000 people have access to your music. The only difference now, again, is the actual feeder mechanisms have been cut into eights, you know, where we used to just have a rock station, or used to just have a country music station, or an urban station, or a gospel station. It's been cut with these various different demographics: urban AC, urban mainstream, rhythmic. Wow. I worked with the artist Jason Derulo. I remember him in the Flash with me in Cleveland. He was 19 years old. His family hired me to our company for a buzz campaign to get him off the shelf of where he was with his production company and enhance his deal with Warner Brothers. Now he performed at the Super Bowl a couple years ago. He did the Janet Jackson tribute at the BET Awards a month ago. He sold 24 million singles. Wow. But as far as his album sales are concerned, he's had 3 albums and they've done no more than about 200,000 or 300,000 units each album. And it's because the paradigm this pyramid is flipped over. Whereas you were once buying more albums than you were singles, young people are buying more singles than albums, because, you know, this is something we all did to ourselves, is that artists were making music, and out of 12 songs, you had 10 crappy ones. And so people were like, okay, I only want these 2 records now, you know, so that's what has happened as far as technologically what has happened and what's concerned. What's that again?
Like, it's like, why are you even making that one? Better than just make like 1 or 2 songs, really. And then just like, That way you can, it's like, I just think like the slower, the more time you take on one song, the better it will be.
Well, there's a rationale for that as well, and I agree with you, it's a good point. However, with adults still buy full-length records at a higher rate than the kids do. The kids are the ones that's just buying the singles.
But isn't it also the fact that you can download the single songs from Google Play?
Yeah, you can download from Google Play and iTunes, right? But adults will still go to a concert and they'll buy it out, or they'll go and they want the experience of buying a record because we're from the generation of buying albums. But this generation now they've cooked up into instant coffee with everything. They want just a single, and they rather put it in a mix of other songs that they like on a playlist. And so you have kids that are sharing each other's playlists now versus going and get the whole thing. Now EPs have emerged again digitally because most people who do like albums, who are kids, they'll buy EP length material, meaning they'll go and get 4 and 5 songs from an album if they like 4 and 5 songs from an album, but they won't buy the whole album. Now with Rhapsody, which is what I also have, I have a family membership with Rhapsody going through my cell phone company, in which I can see for $14.99 a month, not only is my playlist on here, but my daughter's playlist is on here. So I can actually see what my 15-year-old daughter is listening to, which I think is cool. And her playlist is pretty cool. You know, I'm like, okay, I did all right with her. You know, this is pretty cool. Ain't nothing too irate. There was a few things I had to talk to her about, but overall, you know, it affords me the opportunity to look at what is actually happening. However, economically, as you've been hearing in many of the news stories, many of these artists who are getting their checks back from streaming in terms of payment is pennies. I mean, Pharrell, how many people know the song Happy? Pharrell, I mean, you've heard it everywhere.
Sure.
Yeah, he got a $4,500 check back on streams, and he had about 90 million streams of that record. He got a $4,500 check. Well, again, it's another good question. Because he is on a major label, his profits are cut sizably. Now, that's an independent artist, then he brings home a greater share of that revenue. But because he's on a revenue where he's on a revenue sharing program where a wholesale record is, in this day and age, it was $8, but it's now $7 to $6.50. He's now taking home like 60 to 80 cents off of every record. That's being sold. Yeah, and you know, that's, you know, you can add in mechanical royalties if he wrote something or he's published something on the record, and it may be a little more, but it's not much. Whereas if you own the art outright, it's something very different.
Okay, what does that mean, if you own the art?
Well, owning the masters meaning that you're independent, that you paid for the whole record to get done, you own it. You own the copyright for the record. All you then do to get the record access into the stores is a distributor, a distribution company to distribute it into the stores and help with the marketing. At that point in time, they're only taking 15 to 20% of it, you're taking 80%. But when you flip that over with somebody who is in a standard deal, the deals again, it's same time that period of time Kevin and I were talking about when radio changed. The deals change now to where it's a 360 deal, whereas the deal structures, not only are they taking royalties from sales, but they're also taking publishing royalties, they're taking performance and tour royalties, which that never happened, but they're getting that, and they're getting merchandising. So when they say 360, they mean a circumference of everything now.
Not everybody signed those.
There you go, right.
I used to work at Sony, so I know for a fact that most people that are being signed to Sony refuse to sign it.
So is it because they have leverage, or are these just new artists?
Well, it's like people that Sony wants. So if somebody some friends of mine were in this band, and they were being courted by lots of labels. And then Sony wanted them, and then I was telling them like what to do, what to look out for, read the fine print, because many people don't read the fine print.
Right.
They just sign away their life thinking like, oh yeah, I'm with Sony or whoever, and then they don't realize that the relationship is like, you work for me.
Yeah.
It's more like, I'm a pimp, you're the prostitute, I own you. It's kind of like that with the labels. So I try to tell people to watch out for that, the 360, like the ownership of the artist. And I would go to these meetings when I worked there. I worked as an archivist, but also worked in marketing. And I would go to different meetings. As an employee there, you were invited to go to all these different meetings that weren't in your particular category, so you can learn more about their so-called business. So I'd go, and then I remember this one specific meeting where this fellow brought that, 360. This is I don't know what year this was in. It's definitely the 2000s. I'm trying to remember exactly the year because I worked in different, so many buildings before I went to the main corporate thing on Madison Avenue. But the meeting was on Madison Avenue, and he talked about how it was frightening. It was kind of it was the meeting was done in a way where this person talked about how it was going to take over the world, but it was music. And how how all these people were desperate to get on a label, and how we're going to do this 360 deal, and then they explained the specifics of what it is, just like you said, it's this, that, we're going to take this, that, and then and then in this piece of pie, the artist gets that. And me and my friends, because I've worked with people that were of a similar mind's eye, which was these people out of their fucking minds. But we didn't say this, we were just sitting there. And thinking why would anybody do that? But again, these people prey on the desperation of the individual that doesn't read the fine print. And many people don't read the fine print for everything they do in any kind of life or business transaction.
And you know what? The print actually isn't that fine. It's just about some people just really not choosing to read.
Sony's is fine.
Yeah.
It's this big. It's pages and pages of shit written in legal gibberish. Latin. It's amazing. It's written in this crap. And then you need to go to Google to transcribe or translate, which is what I would do. And then people would say, what's this mean? And I say, this means that Sony is the first party, you're the second party, and the third party is the other one. Mm-hmm. They were what are these parties meaning? Because people don't know what that meant. These are artists. I was okay, this is that, this is that. And then they would say, oh, because I signed up for this and that. I said, that's the third party. That would also help people that I knew that were on bands read through the fine print.
And that was more or less the production company who were bringing the talent through the door. And that would more or less be the third party or a manager
or anybody that wasn't them. Anybody that wasn't Sony or whoever was anybody that worked for Sony, whatever, that was the third party, the interloper, the outside. It was all about money and divvying up the pie.
Yeah.
But it was interesting working there because I learned a lot about how things work there. And also how blind people are, because they say, as soon as they see the word Sony, then it's just they either sign over their life. Or when I went to Poland, when I was in Germany, I walked across this bridge and I had my passport, and I just showed my Sony ID. I was Sony, I'm here for talent. They just let me in. I was like, I'm here for talent. So they were like, and then like I told somebody that I met here from Poland last week. I told them the story. They were like, but you know, you don't need a passport. I said, well, I'm not part of the EU. You know, I have to carry like, you know, a passport around, but I left it behind because I don't like to carry it because if I lose it, you know, now you have to like jump through hoops to get passports if you lose it.
I think there's probably a lot of desperation in bands. I mean, you play clubs for a long time. You may or may not have a manager. You cut your own independent singles, whatever. When you see somebody like Sony or a big label or even a medium size, you think, oh my God, I'm bound to make some money from that. You don't realize
Exactly.
they're in business for Sony's in business for Sony.
And believe me,
Exactly.
they are.
I want a T-shirt that says that.
Yeah,
Somebody's
and
business.
just to add to that model was duplicated from Disney. You know, the young talent that they have them under the same semblance of contract. So with Raven Simone and all those other folks that was with Disney and Miley Cyrus at the time, they were all on 360. They did television shows, they did movies, and they were under delivering content. And they got a check. But yet, everything they had to do under that roof was what the industry later developed and said, okay, this works.
Right, Disney's been doing that for years,
Yeah,
since the 60s with Kirk Russell.
Right, and so has another entity that nobody really even pays attention to, but World Wrestling Entertainment. It's the same thing. You know, they have their wrestlers signed to 9-year agreements where they used to sign them for a process of 6 months, and then they would go to work somewhere else, and then, you know, get a new coat of paint on and come back. But now they in the system for 9 years, and they have to develop storylines for them, and they do albums with them, they do movies with them, and everything else. And that's the way it is. So, you know, it's the oligarchy getting bigger with these things because everything is so content based, you know, and it's about ownership of that.
I'm going to take my lead. I just wanted to say thank you. You were very informative. Sure. I had no knowledge of, understanding of, just a very peripheral kind of appraisal. But you gave me also two times to smile. We talked about the technology.
Yeah.
How we can receive content. And I had fond memories. One was around the song, Function of Jealousy, Shorty Long, played it. Favorite part.
Yeah, I played it.
Everybody
goes
wild.
The other day, all the people went crazy.
Oh yeah, it's a bad joke.
Right.
But the other piece is we thought it was the greatest thing in the world since I guess they invented the car. And we had this little record player that was big. You could play the music and you could walk around mobile with this record. You know, now you look at this computerized stuff we got now and say, oh, how primitive. The other thing I thought about, I wish I could remember the city, Detroit, Chicago, somewhere. Didn't know what the radio stations were. I know there's plenty of black folk there. So I go to a hotel, get in there. Oh, they got a menu. I can find the station I want to hear. Where's the black radio? So then it was what, urban contemporary, or whatever.
Yeah,
I said, oh, why didn't you just say black radio? But for the longest time, I said, you didn't have black radio. What is it?
Yeah. And again, you know, that's that was the early 2000s where it was no longer just urban state radio, it just black radio, it was urban mainstream and urban adult contemporary.
But there was no reference to ethnicity. It was this bland title that I didn't know what it meant. You know, and I'm like, okay, which category am I in?
Yeah, exactly. And then, I'm sorry.
I know for years, folks, that I had avoided working in commercial radio, even though I could have like a long time ago. I kind of like stumbled on it by mistake. I think the first place I worked was at WCHJ, which was a black radio station here in Pittsburgh, which was like, we were doing music and then we switched to top. And then we were doing both, and I was like one of the music directors when I was on the air there. It was an AM stereo station here in Pittsburgh, 1550 AM. So I worked there, and then got a job working at the Clear Channel station. Well, it wasn't Clear Channel yet, it was Secret Communication, it was the Smooth Jazz station here in Pittsburgh. So I went over to the Smooth Jazz station.
That must have been real interesting, man.
That was very interesting. It was like structured playlist, you know, and this is before the digital stuff. This is right before the digital stuff. And like you were talking about how they took them to the breakfast,
Yeah.
jazz cruise, the gospel brunch,
Right.
and then they fired everybody. Because I knew the technology and stuff, they kept me, and I ended up being a producer for the morning show on 104.7 The Beat, which was the Clear Channel station, because they switched from Secret Communications to Clear Channel. You're right, they called all the Smooth Jazz people into the room, called them all in the room, said, okay, you go work the board. Work the board. And just, you know, it's like, I looked up, people walking out with sad faces and stuff like that. They had fired the whole staff of the Smooth Jazz folks, right?
Yeah.
And then about half an hour later, started playing this program, upbeat music from Jam and Oldie stuff.
Right.
And that was the beginning of the Jam and Oldie station in Pittsburgh, 104.7. Then they finally switched over to talk radio, Jim Quinn and all those folks. But it was very interesting to see how that worked. But I had avoided going into commercial radio because I knew this type of stuff happened all the time. I'm like, I don't want to be there and get the axe.
Yeah.
Why didn't they
Get set up. Because they wanted to switch formats because it wasn't profitable for the company.
Right.
You know, so they changed formats. Another big mistake that happened in Pittsburgh is when Whammo sold their frequency to Clear Channel and switched their tower location where they eliminated all their coverage to the west of the city of Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
It was just going into Ohio and everything. Remember that?
I remember. Yeah.
And they just completely devastated. That was the beginning of the end for Whammo.
Yeah, because I mean,
Like,
obviously,
because
Western Pittsburgh is, you know, many of your you know, Black, Latino, urban citizens that will listen to it is was in Western Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
You know, it's the same thing happened up in Detroit. I don't know if you guys remember WGPR 107.5.
Yeah.
You know, they were independent and they had a great station, and there was truckers that always come, like, I heard this great station coming through Detroit. And they, you know, they called everybody in a room and they said, we're leasing the signal to Radio 1, you know, for the next 3 years. And so the only person that had the job from that was the traffic coordinator, and who knew how to work the board. And then they gave her own show on Sunday morning. Because she was the station is owned by the Masons, and so the Masons were paying her. So she was out on the payroll. She knew the board, and she was a traffic coordinator. So all of that happened in one fell swoop, and the program director, everybody else went home. And so they now have the signal, and they've gotten huge numbers from that signal, because that was actually the biggest signal in Detroit as far as the most listened to, because it got out to Northwest Ohio, Northeast Indiana. I mean, it radiated, it was powerful. So when they got that signal and they made it hot 107.5, then that's what they used to broadcast urban mainstream stuff. And again, it's a shock to listeners because they don't let the host go on these shows and say goodbye to their listeners, and it's changing. They woke up Monday morning and the listeners were like, hold on, wait a minute, I'm used to listening to this going to radio, they're going to work in the morning, and it's gone.
They
So
punch a button in your car and suddenly you got
yeah,
something
it's
completely
gone.
different.
So the listener is like, wow, you know, and then they'll later read about it in their newspaper by the end of the week. But as you know, in a 24-hour news cycle, it's not even news anymore.
Right.
You know?
Kevin's the pro, but I did give a little taste. And Kevin and I had Black Talk for infotainment
Right.
education 4 to 7, 5 days a week.
Right. So y'all really, when that happened, y'all got to
All
work
of a
out.
sudden, you got an hour on Saturday morning. That's how they do stuff, man. What is this? Change the name of the station, change who's running stuff.
Yeah.
So that's
So-
it's like Clear Channel, that's like
It's now iHeartRadio.
like a corporation, like what? iHeart?
It's called iHeartRadio.
Yeah,
Which is
I
really
listen
fun
to
in
that.
terms of the heart.
Yeah, I guess.
That's ludicrous.
I get that, like, so what I noticed with iHeart is like, there's a lot of channels from a lot of places, but there's not really a lot of variety.
It's so narrowcasted now. You know, the crazy thing is, all of a sudden, the Pittsburgh radio market has 5 country stations.
Yeah,
I'm like,
yeah.
how did that happen?
I know, I know.
You know,
Read the research.
It's because of the research. Because of the research and demographics. They said, folks like country, so we're gonna go where the money
There's
is.
5 country stations in Pittsburgh.
Well, there's also a lot
Based
of,
in Pittsburgh or outside of Pittsburgh.
So that's kind of.
Okay, now there are all of that, turn the dial, there's all these empty spots.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and that's another issue is, and we get into that a little bit when we talk about community radio or low power FM and stuff like that, because there's these empty spots, but they're like not enough room on the spectrum to put stations in, because there might be 2 spots, and there has to be like 3 spots and all this stuff. So you have to do all these engineering studies in order to like get a station in there.
So it's like a liquor license.
Kind of. And it's only going to like the big boys who have the money to say, to do that.
but it is like a liquor license in the sense that you can only have a certain density of
You know,
licenses.
and when
in a
they
certain
changed the rules in the 90s, that changed the game too.
Yeah.
You know?
And again, you know, it's you know, again, that's the disparity. You know, we all want to say that, you know, the airwaves are public, and especially around election time. If you go to your AM dial, there are a number of stations that have. I can say, for instance, there's a number of stations that don't have a slant. They're just news stations. They don't have a slant. They're not a Democrat base or a conservative base or a liberal base. They just are news stations. But around election time, especially the last election, if Salem Broadcasting, who really has a religious base sort of backing, and they like to purchase religious stations, they'll sell the airtime to candidates or to religious conservatives to just run blocks of air. They'll pay for those 24-hour blocks of airtime. They'll just pay that and run whatever they want to run on those stations. Right. It could be a liberal